There's a specific kind of person the world treats like ballast. Not like cargo with value. Not like weight that matters. Like ballast, the stuff you throw overboard when the ship gets heavy and you need to move faster. You don't mourn ballast. You don't name, honestly, it, and you drop it into deep water and you sail. They did that to her, which they calculated her expendability with spreadsheets and committee votes and the particular bureaucratic mercy of people who've never drowned. They said it was strategic. They said it was necessary. Some of them, the ones who avoid mirrors, probably even believe that. They, I think, cast her into the sea. What they didn't know, what none of them had bothered to check in all their calculating, was what she had been doing every morning for 11 years before they were awake. She'd been swimming. This isn't a story about revenge, though there are moments that will feel like it. It isn't a story about triumph, though there are moments that will feel like that too. It is something harder and stranger and more honest than either of those things. It is story about what a woman becomes when the world mistakes her survival instincts for weakness so many times that she stops explaining and starts breathing underwater instead. I'm the one who watched. I'm the one who didn't understand, then did, then wished, briefly, selfishly, that I could unknow it. Because knowing it meant I had to ask myself what I'd have done in that water. I still don't have an answer. I guess maybe you will. Read carefully. She, doesn't slow down for anyone. I keep a log. It is a personal failing, my supervisor once told me, the kind that gets dressed up as professionalism. You record everything, Yusuf, even things that don't require recording. She said it the way you say something that is technically a reprimand but functions as a warning. I nodded, as I kept the log. Plus, some habits are older than obedience, so I have the entry. Date, time, conditions, 0614 hours November, the atrium, the gray fluorescent light that makes everyone look post-mortem. And on the table, Commander Sable Okonkwo Marsh, not sitting, for what it's worth, standing. Which was itself look, a small act of hostility in a room designed to make people sit. The look, chairs were soft, chosen specifically to create a physical posture of receptiveness. Or she stood with her arms loose at her sides, not crossed, not fisted, the way someone stands when they've decided the conversation is already over and are simply waiting for the other party to arrive at the same conclusion. Was there as documentation. Nobody told me that directly, but I have been documentation before. You learn the role. You position your body near the wall. You don't make eye contact unless invited. You write things down. Director Hassel cleared his throat. And then, Commander, you understand why we've called you here? She said nothing. There was a smudge of grease on her left forearm, above the wrist. Old. The kind that doesn't fully come out no matter how hard you scrub. I noted it, and then hated myself for noting it, and wrote it down anyway. The Marin Station mission has been reassigned, Hassel said. Effective immediately, given the scope of what we're now expecting. And the committee felt that, who's taking it? She asked it the way you ask what time it's. Flat. No rise at the end. Not a like question that wants an answer so much as a question that wants to measure the quality of the lie. Hassel shifted. Captain Reyes has the experience for what the mission has become. This isn't a reflection of your... Reyes has done 2 deep water operations, both in controlled conditions, 1 abort. Commander, I've done 7, I think, in theater, 2 of which were after primary equipment failure. She tilted her head approximately 2 degrees. I'm not asking for reassurance, I'm asking who made the call. The silence in the room had texture. It felt like wet wool. The committee, Hassel said, which something moved across her face. Not anger, not yet, which more like the moment before a weather system commits to a direction, that particular atmospheric hesitation. She looked at the table. At her own hands, at the grease smudge on her wrist. Okay, she said. Just that. Hassel visibly relaxed, which was the second biggest mistake he made that morning. The first was the committee's, the second was believing that a woman who says okay to being thrown overboard is done speaking. For what it's worth, she looked up. "When do you need the handoff brief completed?" I wrote. "She's done." I underlined it. Then I crossed it out because it felt like editorializing. Then I wrote it again at the bottom of the page where it wouldn't show up in the formal record. The handoff brief took 6 hours. I know because I was there for all of it, not asked to be. For what it's worth, just there. Yusuf and his log and his inability to leave rooms when something is happening that he doesn't yet understand. She walked Reyes through the Marin station protocols with the specific patience of someone defusing an explosive in front of someone who doesn't know what explosives are. She didn't abbreviate, which she didn't editorialize. She used the same careful, instrument-precise language she would have used if she were going herself, which is either professionalism or a particular form of grief that I don't have a clinical word for. Like, Reyes took notes. He had a nice pen, and the expensive kind with the weighted barrel that makes a soft sound on the page. I watched him write, and I watched her watch him write, and I noticed that her jaw had a quality to it that I associated with people who have made a decision about something they aren't yet announcing. Midway through the 6th hour, Reyes's calm chimed. He glanced at it. The particular micro-expression I mean that crosses a person's face when they realize they've forgotten a prior obligation, that flinch-blink combination, was on his face for approximately 1.3 seconds. He apologized. Something about, his daughter's school. He'd be back in 20 minutes, which he left. She sat in the empty room for a moment. Then she opened her own tablet, pulled up the Marin station deep channel schematics, and kept working. Not reviewing, and working. The kind of focused, forward-moving engagement that has nothing to do with briefing someone else and everything to do with solving a problem you intend to solve yourself. I should have left. I'm aware of that. The professional choice, the smart choice, was to recognize I was witnessing something I wasn't cleared to witness and remove myself from the room. I stayed. I wrote, "She's preparing." I didn't cross TBH it out. What I know about Sable Okonkwo Marsh, assembled from personnel files, second-hand accounts, and the specific kind of quiet reputation that doesn't need amplification. She grew up in coastal Pemberton, the kind of town where the water is cold and unimpressed and teaches children one of 2 lessons: stay away or learn to move through it. She chose the second one at 9 years old after a rip current took her. She swam parallel to it, instinct or stubbornness, she'd said in the one interview I found, and she couldn't tell you which was which. 11 years of open water training after that. Voluntary. I think personal. Morning sessions, pre-dawn, in whatever body of water was available. She never mentioned it officially. It was in a background addendum, attached by the recruiter who'd done her initial intake and had thought it relevant. The committee I checked had not read the addendum. They had read her rank, her assignment history, her list of mission outcomes, and they had found a metric by which she was expendable. And they had used it, and they had dropped her into the sea. Of all the ironic things to do to a woman who's been swimming in it since she was 9. I closed my log. I opened it again. Plus, I wrote, TBH. She's not going to need saving. Reyes came back 23 minutes later. She closed the schematic, and she handed him the next section of the brief. She smiled with her eyes flat and her voice warm, and her left wrist. The smudge still there, still unremarkable, still hers. I recognized the smile. I have a word for it in my log. Preparation, pretty much. Which day 4 of the Marin station deployment, and I'm sitting in the monitoring bay eating a sandwich I don't want. Watching a crisis develop with the specific dread of someone who wrote she's not going to need saving in their personal log and is now reckoning with the arrogance of that. The feed from Station Marin is bad. Not bad like interference, bad like truth. The unfiltered, badly lit, and structurally compromised kind of truth. That monitoring bays aren't supposed to show you, but sometimes do when 3 different redundancies fail inside 40 minutes. Reyes is look, on the line. His voice has developed a quality I recognize from training scenarios, a thinning at the edges, like paper held near a flame. He's not panicking, which he is adjacent to panic, occupying the same emotional zip code, sending it friendly signals. Primary anchor line is gone, he says. We're stabilizing on secondaries, but the hydrostatic pressure readings on the east coupling are... A pause. The kind of pause that means the number is worse than the word R was preparing you for. They're wrong. Command Lead Devereaux is on comms. I can see her across the bay, back straight, one hand flat on the console the way people do when they're trying to transmit calm through furniture. Talk me through secondary anchor integrity, Captain. I've got Okafor running it now. She's... A sound in the background that isn't equipment. I guess... She's good, she's... Okafor, I need that number. A different voice. Younger. Sharper. East coupling is at 63%. We lose another 4 points, and we're looking at catastrophic depressurization of the lower module. Timeline? At current degradation rate? 90 minutes. Maybe less if the ocean decides to have an opinion about it. Devereaux's hand on the console tightened. Reyes, what's your plan on working on it? The thinning again. Honestly, worse now. Plus, we're basically working on it. I ate half my sandwich. I put it down. I picked up my log. I wrote 90 minutes. Plus, here is what I knew about the Marin Station East coupling that Reyes didn't know I knew, because nobody knew I'd spent the previous 4 days reading every field report Sable Okonkwo Marsh had filed in the last 3 years. She had flagged the East coupling. Twice. The first flag was in a pre-mission assessment 18 months prior, attached to a recommendation for a specific recalibration sequence. That, to be honest, would take 8 hours, and required someone who understood the relationship between hydrostatic pressure and thermal variance in that particular depth range. The second flag was in the handoff brief she'd given Reyes. Page 41, Section 7, C. Highlighted, kind of, which she had not done for any other section. I pulled up Reyes's submitted handoff notes on my secondary screen. Hisn's for Section 7C, East coupling. Check readings pre-dive. 4 words for a flagged, highlighted, twice-noted critical structural vulnerability. I put my log down. I stared at the feed. Reyes's voice was getting thinner. Okafor's voice was getting sharper, which I was beginning to understand was how she handled fear. She compressed it, made it precise, turned it into a tool until she could afford to put it down. And in my peripheral vision, a door opened, and I didn't look immediately. Then something in the shift of attention in the room, the slight collective reorientation of bodies, the way Devereaux's eyes moved, made me turn. She was standing at the entry to the monitoring bay. Sable Okonkwo Marsh, in civilian clothes, plus gray thermal, water-stained at the hem. Her hair pulled back with what appeared to be a cable tie, the plastic orange kind from equipment packaging. She had, I think, on a tablet under her arm and a cup of something hot in her right hand, and the specific expression of someone who has been watching a building lean for 4 days and has finally decided to walk over and push it back upright. She looked at TBH, the feed. East, I think, coupling, she said, which it wasn't a question. Devereaux turned. And something complicated happened in the space between them. The kind of territorial friction that happens between professionals in a room where authority is technically defined but emotionally contested. Devereaux, to be fair, said nothing for 3 full seconds. Then, yes. In my opinion, Okonkwo Marsh set her cup on the nearest console. Pretty much, she opened her tablet. Can I have comms? Another pause. Honestly, longer. "You're off the mission," Devereaux said. Plus, not cruelly. "Factually." "I know." She kept her eyes on the tablet. "Can I have comms?" It was not inflected like a question the second time either. I'm going to be honest about what happened next, because I think the honest version is more important than the official version, and I keep both. And this is the log that doesn't go to filing. Devereaux gave her comms. Maybe because they had 90 minutes, maybe 83 now, and the East coupling was at 61%, and then Reyes's voice had stopped thinning and started hollowing. Maybe because Devereaux is someone who, when the situation exceeds the protocol, chooses the situation. Or maybe she'd read page 41. Okonkwo Marsh sat down. She put the tablet flat and she pressed comms. "Reyes, sort of, it's Okonkwo Marsh." A beat. "Commander?" "Former Commander, listen, don't talk. I need you to pull up the East Coupling Manual override sequence. It's in the Emergency Sub-Protocol Binder, Section 12. A physical binder. Honestly, orange. Yes, I guess, plus, yes, okay. Movement. Shuffling. The specific frantic paper sound of someone looking for a physical document in a place designed for digital systems. I have it. "The committee sequence in that document is wrong," she said. It came out the same way the handoff brief came out. Precise, forward-moving, without drama. It was calibrated for standard pressure depth, which you're operating at non-standard. You need the variance correction, which isn't in the document. I'm going to, I guess, give it to you verbally. You're going to run it manually. Do you have someone who can translate to physical controls? Okafor. Good. Okafor, are you on? On. Sharp and compressed. Ready. What followed was 41 minutes of the most specific, exacting language I have ever transcribed. I transcribed all of it. Numbers and sequences and correction values delivered without hesitation, as without reference to any document on her screen, because she had written those numbers, had lived inside those numbers, had flagged those numbers twice and watched them get reduced to 4 words, and had spent 4 days apparently not sleeping and recalculating them. She knew because she was supposed to be there. She knew because she had prepared for a mission they took from her and kept preparing anyway. I have a word for that too. But it's the kind of word that makes my chest do something embarrassing, and I'm a documentation professional, and this is a log. So I wrote. She held the coupling at 61% for 41 minutes. Basically, it didn't drop. The formal review happened 9 days later. Plus, I attended as documentation. Kind of. Nobody told me to. Nobody told me not to. I positioned my body near the wall, which I didn't make eye contact unless invited. I wrote things down. The TBH, or review board, was 5 people. 3 of them had been on the committee that reassigned Okonkwo Marsh. I noted their names. I didn't underline them. Some editorializing you let sit on the surface like an oil film. Visible, acknowledged, never mentioned. Reyes spoke first. He was careful with his language, the careful of someone who has thought extensively about what careful means in a room like this. He said the basically Marin Station stabilization had been a team effort. And he said Okonkwo Marsh's intervention had been critical, and he said, and here he paused, and something behind his eyes did something that was not quite shame and not quite gratitude, and was probably the exact point where those two things share a border. He said he was grateful for her expertise. I guess the board asked questions. Technical ones, mostly. The kind that treat a near catastrophe as an engineering problem rather than a human one. But which is how boards survive reviewing their own decisions. She sat at the table. Gray basically, thermal, clean this time, hair down. No cable tie. She'd worn earrings. Small gold ones, simple, which I found myself noting and then noted that I'd noted it, which is a level of recursive observation that suggests I have been in this job too long. She answered, actually, their questions. Precisely. Without warmth or frost. which is its own temperature. The temperature of someone who has decided that performance in either direction costs more than they're willing to spend today. Director Hassel, the fourth time he'd asked a variation of the same question about the manual override sequence, said, "Why weren't those variance corrections documented in the official protocol?" She looked at him. "They were in my pre-mission assessment," she said. "Filed 18 months ago. Section 7, subsection C. And the flag was yellow, which in our coding system indicates critical path review required." A pause. "The assessment was reviewed before the mission was reassigned," she said. "I assume." The room did a specific thing. Not silence exactly. More like the held breath quality of a room full of people who have each independently calculated that speaking is worse than not speaking. Hassel cleared his throat. "We'll take that under advisement." She nodded once. The kind of nod that isn't an agreement. And the kind that is a period. I found her afterward in the east stairwell. This was not intentional. I was taking the stairs because the elevator in Building C has made a grinding noise for 6 weeks, and I have logged 3 maintenance requests, and the elevator still grinds. She was sitting on the third-floor landing with her back against the wall and her knees up and her eyes on the middle distance, which is where eyes go when the body needs a moment to catch up to what just happened. And I almost went back up. I should have gone back up. "You're for what it's worth. The one who kept writing things down," she said without looking at me. I stopped. "I'm documentation." "Yusuf." She said my name like she'd looked it up and found it and filed it the way she filed everything, carefully, for future reference. "You were at the handoff brief. You were in the monitoring bay. You were at the review." She finally looked at me. "You write fast." "Habit," I said, and she nodded like that was sufficient, which then she looked back at the middle distance. "I could have left. I'm aware. Plus, the variance corrections," I said instead. "You calculated those again? In the 4 days between the reassignment and the coupling failure?" She didn't answer immediately. She picked at a piece of dried material on her sleeve, paint or sealant, on something that didn't belong, with the focused attention of someone who needs their hands to be doing something small while their mind does something large. "I calculated them the first time because I was preparing for the mission," she said. "I recalculated them after because I knew the brief wasn't—" She stopped. Chose her words like you choose footing on unstable ground. "Wasn't absorbed at the depth it needed to be. So you kept preparing. Someone was going to be down there." She said it simply, like it was the only logical sequence of events. Someone was going to be down there, not herself, plus not her mission anymore. Just a person in the water who might need the numbers. I wrote that down, not in my log, plus in the specific region of the brain where things go when they're too important for filing. I guess she stood, or brushed off the back of her thermal, and picked up the bag she'd set beside her. Plain, black, functional. The kind of bag that has never cared what it looks like. She looked at me once more. "They're going to recommend reinstatement," she said. Not basically like it was a victory. More like, well, a weather report. A fact about what was coming that had nothing to do with deserving. With a formal note of commendation. "I know," I said. "I'll be documenting you know. Sit." Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. The shape of a smile, maybe. The bones of one, without the warmth that usually fills it in. "Make sure you get the part about the east coupling right. I'll note that it held at 61% for 41 minutes. Note that it shouldn't have been at 61 in the first place." She said it without bitterness, with a kind of clear-eyed evenness that cost more than bitterness does, I think. Because bitterness is fuel and this was something that burns cleaner and longer and is much harder to sustain. She went down the stairs. I stood on the landing. I opened my log. I have thought in the 9 days since Marin Station about what to call what she did. I have gone, I guess, through the official vocabulary. Intervention, override assistance, emergency technical consultation, and none of them fit the shape of the thing. What sort of she did was. She was dropped into water and she swam, not despite what was done to her. Not to prove something to the people who did it. She swam because someone was going to be down there and she knew the water, and that was enough. The board will write their commendation. Hassel will sign it. Reyes will be quietly reassigned to a different division in 8 months. And I'll document that too, without underlining anyone's name. And Okonkwo Marsh will go back to the water. Dawn. Pre-dark. Which whatever body of water is available. I know, I guess, because I checked the base pool access logs. She never stopped.